Hello, stroke warriors and families everywhere. Welcome back to Stroke Warrior Radio, where recovery finds a voice. Today, we're joined by someone who has spent years helping people to challenge the limits of what they believed was possible after stroke and brain injury. Our guest today is Mike Studer, internationally recognized neurological physical therapist, educator, TEDx speaker, author of The Brain That Chooses Itself, Catherine Worthington Fellow of the American Physical Therapy Association, and one of the leading voices in neuroplasticity and precision rehabilitation. Mike, welcome to Stroke Warrior Radio.
Ralph, it's my pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
Oh, it's great to have you, Mike. When do you sleep?
We won't go too far down that rabbit hole, but I'm what's known as a short sleeper, and I have a gene mutation that allows me to get by on about 4.5 hours of sleep.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
I wish I had that.
it's
Anyway,
it's a blessing and a curse.
yeah, exactly. Well, I want to get right into your whole basis is about neuroplasticity. Number one, what is it? And then I'm really curious about your statement that you made a while back. Neuroplasticity does not time out ever. What do you mean by that?
So let's start in the order that you asked them. Number one, what is neuroplasticity? It means a lot of different things, but it's the brain's potential to change. Now, the brain can change for positive. I'm restoring after concussion, stroke, but the brain can also change for negative. I have developed uh, post traumatic stress disorder or fear, and all of those have a basis in neuroplasticity. Now, let's go to the second part of your question. Neuroplasticity is the underpinning of all learning, Ralph. And so, as we learn throughout our lives, regardless of how young or old we are, we change a step that we make, we change the pronunciation of a word, we change our perception of how heavy something is, we're learning. And there are no points in life, no matter how young, old, active, or inactive we are, that neuroplasticity is no longer available to us.
I didn't realize there was a time limit on it.
Zero time limit at all whatsoever. Now, neurogenesis, which actually means developing new neurons, is also not timed out, but it in fact is only viable in a very small area of the brain. I'll spare you the details there, but neuroplasticity is the potential to make change, and it underpins all learning. Zero timeout, always available.
When our listeners or survivors or warriors hear that, what do you hope they understand from that?
So if you challenge the brain and you are engaged by that challenge and see a satisfactory amount of improvement, your brain will always be responsive to change for the better. That's exactly what I would hope listeners would garner from that. Satisfactory stimulus, satisfactory improvement, and I stay motivated, and the brain says, I didn't think I could achieve that. Releases some dopamine, and then you try for more.
Very cool. What, why, so many of us heard 3 months, 6 months. Why is that myth of you only have 6 months, um, it's 6 months to recover, survive for so long?
Okay, great question. We do know in medical literature it takes about 17 years. I'm not estimating, I'm not throwing a guess out there. That's research basis that it takes about 17 years for a medically held theorem to change, which means once it's been grounded for 15 years, 20 years, 30 years in medicine and taught and retaught in physical therapy schools and medical schools alike, it takes 17 years to reverse that opinion. That's one reason. The second reason is that there's some basis for that. All you're going to get is in the first 30 days, first 3 months, first 6 months. And that's based on the physiology of the brain spontaneously improving without rehabilitation, meaning the healing processes that naturally occur in the brain, if you were to never engage in therapy, will time out. You will only get so much better by the natural healing. But the benefit that you can amass or grasp from rehabilitation does not time out. So there's a qualifier. When am I going to be done recovering? Well, if you did nothing about it, about here. When am I going to be done recovering? If I'm doing something about it, about never.
Okay. Okay. So essentially, too, I found after my recovery, at some point in time, we all have to make a choice on how we want to recover.
Yes.
Okay. I'm glad I understand that correctly. What actually um, happens inside the brain years, even decades after a stroke?
So, with sufficient stimulus, if the brain is challenged, and if the person sees improvement from that challenge, you have to have both those qualifiers. Then, physically, what happens in the brain are several things. Number one, the brain grows new connections. We call that synaptogenesis. It makes new synapses and new connections. I'll spare you the details. We talk about roots of trees and branches of trees, dendrites, axons, etc. All right, so it makes new connections. One neuron connects with more neurons because it's demanded. Second thing that happens is that the brain becomes more efficient. It takes a neurotransmitter, which is just a chemical, and says, wow, I need this much of that chemical to create an action potential, meaning I'm going to send a message down the line and make your wrist lift up. When the brain becomes more efficient, it takes less of that neurotransmitter. Third thing that happens, and this is a reductive story, the brain actually develops more blood flow to active areas of the brain. And we call that angiogenesis, which means developing capillaries, which are the endpoints of arteries. So more blood flow, more efficiency, more connections is the answer.
So um, I heard I heard in my recovery, and as many of us have heard, this is good as it's going to get. And that I've heard years and years later. As you may know, many people do hear that. But after 6.5, 7 years, I consider my own recovery became remarkable. What kinds of improvements are realistic at what points in time?
Okay, so let's start at the start. First 3 months of stroke, hemorrhagic stroke is slightly different than ischemic, but generally I'm speaking, first 3 months, your brain's healing, spontaneous recovery. Even if you did nothing, it's medically getting better, no inflammation, dropping down some of the blockages, if you will. All right, within that time frame and past that, we have neuroplasticity, and I already told you the brain can get better by connections, efficiency, and blood flow. Okay, now let's say you start to plateau a little bit. You're not making gains quite as fast as you were. What if you step away from the type of therapy that you're doing that's focusing on the brain recovery, and now you focus on body recovery? Let me get stronger, let my muscles get less fatigable, and let me gain some power. Now you come back with greater body resources and you ask the brain to do some things that it wasn't capable of doing before because it was limited by the body. And so, even if you plateau here, now working on body resources, the brain can come back and say, whoa, this body's more capable. Let me see what else we can achieve now. Sense of balance, power to get out of a chair, walking speed, and the list goes on and on. You can have a plateau, but it doesn't mean you're done recovering.
I'm curious of the before I get into the actual recovery and how we do that. What role does hope play in recovery, and how do you separate hope from unrealistic expectations? I mean, we're
Wow.
told so many things and not told so many things. How do you get that hope back?
Hope is potentially the most important thing to start recovery. You can talk about the term hope and you can call it belief. Medically, we call it self efficacy, my belief in my ability to control my recovery. And if you talk about rehabilitation and the literature there, we call it enhanced expectancies. They're all the same thing. When the brain sees that it's possible to change, the brain is fed by reward. I'm seeing change. Now the brain is primed to be alert, watchful, and expecting more improvement. Hope is everything for that. If you don't have hope and you've been delivered the correct rehabilitation, then your brain will not change near as much and may not change at all. Now, let's take the second part of your question. Is hope sometimes unrealistic? Where does hope stop and unrealistic expectations start? Well, I think you have to go back to objective measurements. Are you truly getting better in your walking speed? Is your balance measurably better? Can you stand up from a lower surface than you could have last month without using your hands? The list could go on and on. If you want to define hope as compared to unrealistic expectations, you need to keep some accountability in there, objective measures. It cannot be your wife says, honey, you look like you're standing up so much better, because people receive that and pretty soon it becomes white noise. I don't believe what you're telling me. It can't be your therapist saying, Ralph, you look like you're balancing so much better. The human brain's intelligent and it needs objective measures.
That brings me to challenges. You described neuroplasticity almost as an economic system. You said the brain is like a capitalist economy in reverse, demand and supply. Please describe that for us.
Okay, if the brain is not challenged to do something that's slightly beyond its current capacities, it will never gain greater capacities. Ralph, this is no different than bone density. Skeleton not loaded, skeleton loses density. Skeleton loaded, skeleton amasses more calcium, more density. Okay, it's not different than strengthening. Muscles not challenged, muscles get weaker. Muscles challenged to the correct dosage, muscles get stronger. It needs a stimulus, demand, in order to supply recovery. Almost every system in the body needs and responds to a demand. If the demand is too high and I never see myself improving, the brain says, forget it. This is unrealistic. You're asking me to do too much. Your listeners may be surprised to know that one of the only reasons the oxygen system, the VO2 system, the lung system, the circulatory system ever gets better is when it senses there's not enough oxygen. So it's a demand. I don't have enough oxygen. And it's a supply. Let's build some more arteries here. The brain's no different.
There's, I guess um, why are mistakes? I'm struggling with this because there's a mental health aspect I went through. I'd
Yes.
get a therapist, put me on a bike and walk away. I'd get therapists, go through a checklist. I think one of the things I love about what you do and talk about is bringing those challenges forth and the mistakes. I think the mistakes are actually important. How do those teach the nervous system?
Ralph, I'm going to go back to your introduction of me some 20 minutes ago. You said that I was an expert in neuroplasticity and precision rehabilitation. And here's where precision comes to fruition. The degree of errors that any human being is willing to endure is different for that person and different by the context that they're in. If you're on a putting green, Ralph, and you are attempting to putt 100 balls and you don't sink any from 15 feet away, you might walk away frustrated. Another individual might say, but look at that, I got several of them within an inch and they're totally satisfied. Errors are what drive the nervous system to improve. It says, can you try that a little differently? Could you do that a little bit better? But if we incur too many errors, the dose becomes the poison. And you might have even heard that before in layperson science as well. We know that every person and every situation is a little bit different. Now, remember what we just said 5 minutes ago, demand and supply. If you went up and you putted those same 100 balls, Ralph, and every single one of them went in, your brain's not going to improve at all because it says, what am I changing? There's no demand, so there's no supply. And to put it very simply, errors are a demand to do better.
Briefly talk about these challenges. Um, how much is enough? Is there such a thing as too little or too much?
Yes. And here's where rehabilitation has evolved. I was in physical therapy school in 1989. And at that point, we largely were taught and believed it's therapist does to patient. Therapist does to patient. We move your arm this way. We give you these activities. We pattern your body to move this way. And we do what was known at that time recapitulate, which means literally put your head back on. Now we know that it's a symbiotic team relationship. No one is higher than the other. So the number of errors that I give you better be the number of errors that you prefer and are willing to tolerate. Because if my therapy is more challenging than you prefer, now you feel dejected, you're not seeing wins, you stop paying attention and looking for wins, I deject your hope and you stop coming to therapy. If my therapy is too easy and I'm not demanding enough for you, including you not experiencing enough errors with occasional wins, now you feel that I'm pandering to you. I'm making it too easy for you. Your $40 copay is going to waste. You feel dejected. You feel that this is boring and you stop attending. So the level of errors and the level of challenge has to be commensurate. What I give you, what you want.
I love hearing that because, like I said, people put me on a bike and walked away. There were no
Yeah,
challenges. And it
there's
takes a
zero challenge.
while, I think, because of the cognitive issues we go through, to even realize that we're not getting challenged. And that
Yeah.
was hard for me.
And you're
Yeah,
not there in rehabilitation to do something you could do at home. You're paying money, you're asking your health insurance to pay money, you're spending your valuable time. You need to be challenged exactly as you prefer, and it's not hard. Ralph, when I challenge you to do something that you're not capable of, do you want me to come back and try that challenge again for a second repetition, or should we walk away from it? I've got to personalize my care to the individual in front of me.
that's what I argue all the time. If we don't ask the questions, or you don't ask the questions of us, the treatment's going to be lousy. You know,
Yeah,
it's got to be a relationship.
Ralph, I'll tell you very quickly from a Wayne Gretzky esque comment that a lot of your listeners will identify. You miss 100% of the questions you never ask.
I
Now
love
we
it.
know, remember, Wayne Gretzky said you miss 100% of the shots you never take. And as a healthcare provider, I miss 100% of the questions that I never ask.
You've outlined something that every survivor really needs to hear for successful rehabilitation. Challenge, opportunity for error, evidence of improvement, meaningful activities. Let's unpack that a little bit. What is meaningful activity and why is that so important?
Okay. One of the original principles of neuroplasticity developed in 2008 in a very famous article was called salience. It means therapy needs to include activities that are meaningful to this person. Now let's unpack that. Ralph, the if I have the mission to challenge your balance and I say, you know what would be a great challenge for his balance is if I stood 3 feet away from him and I inflated a balloon and we batted a balloon back and forth. So he would have to sometimes hit with a weight shift to the right and sometimes to the left. And I said, that's a great task. It involves balance and reaction speed and weight shifting and sometimes high and sometimes low. It's got a variety. And I think to myself, what a masterful task. And you say, this doesn't feel like therapy. This feels like play. This doesn't take any skill. And this is boring to me. I didn't come here to play games. So if the task is not salient to you, it is not going to command your brain to engage fully, to be attentive, and to be intense. So instead, I should have said, Ralph, what are some times in your life you're losing your balance so that I can imitate those tasks in a therapy setting and actually give you clearly something that is meaningful that we work on that requires my skill and your capabilities. So you say, when I'm walking my dog, Mike, sometimes he darts back and forth. And so now I create a task that's not balloon volleyball. I create a task that makes it look like your dog darting back and forth. Maybe I put you on a treadmill. I put some chalk drawings, and occasionally when that treadmill belt's rolling, you see the image of a dog and you've got to change your position. Now I've got salience, I've got meaningful activity.
This may sound like a really weird question, but the reason you got there is those questions you asked. What should we as survivors look for in a therapist that's personalizing our treatment?
You should not give your therapist 3 strikes. You should first give them the opportunity to ask the right questions. Strike one if they didn't ask. Second, you should say, I see what you're trying to get at here, but this task doesn't feel meaningful to me. Strike number two, if they don't make a change, you're not going to give them 3 strikes, Ralph, and that's it. Number one, expect the therapist to personalize the care for me. Number two, if you tell them it doesn't feel personalized, they don't make a change. Now you're looking for somebody else. Because in this day and age, we have therapists that know how to treat stroke, want to treat persons recovering from stroke, that you should be able to find someone that matches your personality and can personalize the care.
And there's something else I didn't realize. There's a difference. There's a neurophysical therapist as opposed to a physical therapist.
It's true, but I want to tell you I have a strong bias for neurologic physical therapy. I've been doing it for 35 plus years. I'm not going to stand here in this podcast and say neurotherapists are the best. I'm going to tell you that people that are interested in becoming a specialized neurologic clinical specialist, therapist with credentials and designations, they're demonstrating interest. They've probably studied more. They want to be here and they want to see people like you. So, right there, you should have something that's elevated. I don't know that neurotherapists are smarter than ortho, smarter than pediatrics. I just know that if you're coming to them in their specialty, they should be the best capable or most capable to serve you.
And now you've got stories, but can you give us maybe an example of one of your patients that changing the one activity dramatically improved their performance?
I'm going to give you a patient with the initials JP, and
Uh-huh.
I'm going to tell you that engaging JP with an activity that caused him to compete against himself, we call that gamification, changed everything. So JP came to me severely disabled by one of the most traumatizing strokes. We call it a thromboembolic shower. He had clots all over his brain. And he came to me with impairments in right hand and vision and ability to walk and speed of processing. But we engaged JP and challenged him, demand and supply, to just compete against himself. Oh, you walked 3 steps without holding on to the walker. How many more can you do? And that's called gamification, tracking something that can be accountable, that can be added up and can be witnessed. And then he wanted to see how many more he could do. And before then, before you know it, we've got to change the task altogether because he's increasing his all-time point total for steps without a cane or for speed of walking, number of sit to stands in a defined period of time. Gamification is the motivator for some people, but it's not a one size fits all.
I actually saw the video of him. I know who you're talking about. When he started running,
Yeah,
I saw that video. This was probably a couple of years later, but
yeah.
and I know are you the one that did the golf with him too?
I did. I did. We are talking about the same person. I don't want to
Oh, no,
compromise
yeah.
his confidentiality, but yes.
I think you also you mentioned a lot about how rehabilitation falls short. Let's briefly go into this one size fits all. Why do you still see standardized programs that don't reflect the individual?
It is a very frustrating conversation for me within our profession that we have a desire to have clinical practice guidelines, a pathway. Yet we are unwilling to personalize the pathway to the individual in front of us. So I'll tell you, one size will never fit all because we haven't taken into consideration what motivates this person, what do they want to be able to accomplish, what's the frequency of error that they tolerate, and the list goes on and on. So it'll never be a one size fits all. And it's a difficult wrestle with the research community who wants to say, this works for people recovering from stroke. And I'll tell you, largely, you can tell me in your research what works. But statistics are for populations, Ralph. They're not for people. That can shape what I'm likely to use, but then I need to find out if that approach works for this person. So I need a collection of things that work. And then I need to be the expert clinical decision maker who has a listening ear and a thinking brain that can individualize what research brings to what this person wants, prefers, and can tolerate.
Isn't there somewhat of an empathic pathway there that repeated failures after recovery create psychological difficulties as well?
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. And once you have experienced too much consecutive failure in any way you define failure, couldn't stand up without your help, therapist didn't give me an engaging session, progress examination doesn't show that I'm making measurable improvement. Once you've experienced too many failures in a row, your brain naturally, no matter what you're going through, says, I wonder if I'll actually be able to make any change at all. And so when you have a disengaged patient, you even have therapists say, oh, my patient's just not motivated. And what I like to say is that poorly motivated patients are poorly motivated, which means it's on the therapist. You didn't individualize your motivation for that person.
I love that. How can, through the stress of caretaking, through the stress of recovering, through the cognitive issues, how can survivors and care partners recognize whether their therapy is appropriately challenging?
So I'll go back because I always take accountability and objective measures first. Number one, show me. It's basically the Jerry Maguire moment. Show me the money, which means show me the improvements. I need to know that my 2 minute walking speed is covering more distance. My 30 seconds at the stand, I've got more repetitions, and the list goes on and on. I'll spare you and your listeners. Number one, I've got to see objective measures that you are not shell gaming me with. Look, you're improving. Nope, I want to see the objective measures. Number two, and it's right there with it, the individual that's improving needs to say, because of the therapy I'm receiving, I'm able to do this month. And last month, I know I wouldn't have been able to do that. Go shopping, go to a grandchild's birthday, drive the car, play golf, whatever the case may be. Both of these are right there. It's up to the therapist, show me improvement, and it's up to the patient to say, let me think about this. Is my quality of life better? And in what way? Both things.
And that creates the shared decision making.
100%. We talk about collaborative goal setting, therapeutic alliance, shared decision making, and we, for whatever reason, call these the soft skills in therapy. They're hard skills, Ralph. And only therapists that are very intentional to employ those skills will actually be able to maximize the recovery of the patients they get the privilege to work with.
Many of my listeners have heard all of this from me before, but um, I was very angry for a lot of years. I discovered a few years post-stroke that I was captain of my own team and can
Mm.
hire and fire my own therapist or doctors. Um, and unfortunately, I wasn't with a care partner, but I'd like you to touch on that as well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I it took me a while to recognize that my therapy was appropriately challenging. What
Mm-hmm.
questions should patients be asking to get to that shared decision making?
I would start from the voice of the patient by saying, in what ways do you plan to include my opinion in our care?
Love it. I
And
like
the
that.
therapist might say, well, I'll create the session and you can decide what order we do them in. Or the therapist might say, well, I'll tell you, you need to wear a weight around your ankle and you can decide how heavy that weight is. But the therapist better be able to answer that question.
Okay. Um, and of course, once I got involved in my own recovery, things became better. I mean, oh my God, what a difference it made. You know,
Do you know
ask,
one of the reasons why that's the case, Ralph?
pardon me?
Do you know one of the reasons why your therapy under your control should have methodologically gotten better?
Why is that?
One of the main reasons is the power of choice, what we call autonomy, belief, and choice. I'll be very brief with this. When Ralph has the autonomy to know that his opinion is going to mean something, and he can create some beliefs about, I want to spend time on the treadmill, I need to do more weightlifting, and then his choices are implemented in therapy, you have ABCs: autonomy, belief, and choice. And here's the answer. One of the things that gets turned on when you have the ABCs is called the placebo effect. Now you say, this therapy was built for me, by me, and with me, so I believe in it, and I think it's the right thing for me. And now your brain is looking for improvements. It's not a placebo. That's that's a snake oil, a sugar pill, an ointment. What we're talking about here is called the placebo effect. Your brain turns on alertness and starts looking for improvements and sees it and gets fed by that.
Fantastic. I love that. I want to spend about 5 minutes on teams.
Okay.
Many of our listeners are trying to decide whether to seek care. I started interviewing and visiting therapists in facilities before selecting them. I didn't do that for a number of years. What should families look for? And do they have to go with the referrals from the doctors?
Now, you're speaking of therapy teams,
Yes.
physical, occupational, speech therapy teams, etc. All right. Well, one good, dipstick, as though any of us still check our own oil, would in fact be how long has this team been in place together? Do we have a lot of turnover here at this clinic or hospital or program? Because therapists that want to be someplace and therapists that are happy about being there will actually be more exceptional care providers. If you don't have anybody on that team that's been there for longer than 30 days, it's not the worst sign, but it's not a good sign.
Yeah,
So that's
that
that's
makes sense.
one good thing to look at there. And then the second thing is, um, can I speak with one of the therapists before I start here and ask them that question that I posed to you 11 minutes ago? In what way will you use my opinions and how will they be integrated into our care? Just tell me, answer me that.
You know, you said, I think I read it in one of your books or one of your papers. Therapist patient teams work best. Teams that speak together, peak together. I
This
pulled
is the
that out and
case.
I just love that.
Yes, yeah. And see, that's the thing. If you've got a therapy team that's never been together, they don't collaborate, they don't communicate, and people tend to leave those positions when they don't like the people they're working with or don't get a chance to collaborate with them. So when they speak together, they will peak together. They'll stop being redundant. They'll stop. One of them won't tell you something that contradicts the other, and now they'll be complementary and everybody's headed forward toward your recovery.
I love it. I love that. I put that on one of my post-its on the wall. Um, I want to jump into a couple other things, a little off track here, not off track, but
Yeah,
I'm always curious why people do things. What originally drew you into physical therapy?
it's an interesting story. Ralph, when I was 16, I still thought maybe I could be a Major League Baseball player. By the time I was 17, I was graduating from high school, and I thought maybe I could play D1 baseball. I got an academic full ride scholarship to the University of Missouri. That may sound like a bigger deal than it is. It's not. I was in a graduating class of 29, and everybody that's in the top 3% of high school classes in Missouri got a full ride to the University of Missouri. Okay, so I was valedictorian. No big deal. There was 29 of us. I go there and I say I'm going to walk onto the baseball team. I walk on, I make it through 3 rounds of cuts, and I get cut from the team. All right, great, no problem. I'm not going to be a Major League Baseball player or a collegiate baseball player at this level. How can I continue to be involved with baseball? Well, journalist or athletic trainer, they don't have an athletic training program, but hey, we've got a physical therapy program. Okay, what's physical therapy? Well, I'll go down that route. Hey, Mike, you need to get some volunteer hours. I go to the hospitals, build up some volunteer hours so that I can apply to physical therapy school. Wow, you're reteaching people how to walk again? Forget this baseball stuff. I want to do neurotherapy. That's really making an impact in people's lives. The rest is history.
Is there a defining patient or experience that convinced you this would be your life's work?
My grandfather had a stroke. We brought him from northern Iowa to our home in southern Missouri. I watched him recover. My dad and I knew nothing about rehabilitation, nor did my mom. My brother was out of the house at that time. I was still in high school. And little did I know it at that time that would impact my decision that would come 18 months later, neurophysical therapy. It was my grandfather who came down, and we didn't sit him in a recliner chair. We got him out and he did things with us. And demand became supply, and he fully recovered from that stroke. So I didn't know it, but it was his time in my late high school years that were actually going to be impressionable. And then it made sense when I all saw it together in Columbia, Missouri at Rusk Rehabilitation Hospital. I was like, wow, that's what we did with my grandfather. And then the picture was clear.
You hold an incredible number of certifications and recognitions. Looking back, what has all that really taught you um, beyond the letters after your name?
Ralph, it's just demand and supply. I am a voracious lifelong learner. And the only thing that motivates me about those credentials is being able to amass the knowledge so that I can become a better therapist. I'm not done growing. I don't know it all. We as a profession still don't know it all. And so my job is not to get more letters, but to get more knowledge. If the letters come with it, great. If they don't, no problem.
You you've written a great book, The Brain That Chooses Itself. We've talked about sharing some of the chapters of your book later, but what inspired you to write that?
So I have been aging at approximately 1 day every 24 hours, just like the rest of us. And we call this me search rather than research. When you begin investing your own, let's just say, cognitive capacities to learn about things that'll help you and also help other people. About 6 years ago, I started to learn about lifespan and health span slightly before it became truly popularized. I started lecturing about physical activity and nutrition and sleep and social connectivity and challenging your brain. And I was doing lectures and I said, gosh, I've got these lectures pretty well polished. How can I put this down in writing and make it, how can I expand the depth of my knowledge? And so I started walking on a treadmill, writing this book in June of 2024. And all I was trying to do was learn more and more about how the body influences the brain and the brain influences the body. And I basically brought my life's experience into it. When I call it the brain that chooses itself, I'm empowering readers to find something that works for them, just like I do in the clinics. You got to give people the right to make a choice. Regulation, legislation, coercion, guilt, none of it works. You got to give people science in a simple way, let them make a choice, and then they accelerate, just like your rehabilitation did once it was in your control.
Who did you write it for?
Everyone. What's very interesting is that every one of the principal chapters has an introductory. If you don't have a medical background, here's what I'm saying, and here's how to make it easy. And then if you've consumed that introductory portion of the chapter, now immediately following that, you can choose to read on in that chapter what's called the deeper dives. So if you like science and you like research and you want to know the physiology, you get to read on in that chapter. If you don't, skip to the next chapter.
Is there anything that surprised you after you wrote it? About
Oh,
writing it?
wow. So much. So
Okay.
much. Vigorous intermittent lifestyle physical activity. I'm going to walk out to get the mail. And if I actually jog a couple of steps and walk a couple of steps and jog a couple of steps, and I put some intensity into something I was already going to do, I can get a 7-time return in lifespan on every minute I put into that intensity. A 1 to 7 return, a minute worth of jogging when I was already going to do that, 7 more minutes of life. That's one thing. Consistency of sleep. Eat 30 different plants per week is another big thing. So many things. I could go on and on.
Yeah. What do you hope remember readers remember years after finishing the book?
That your health care and your wellness pursuits should have your voice. What you choose will be more effective. Your wellness providers, therapist, trainer, coach, what they bring to you should be choices, two or three. Your physician, nurse practitioner, therapist, or others, what they bring to you should be choices, two or three. Healthcare or wellness, you should be allowed to pick from those two or three options, and that will be what works best for you.
We're running out of time, unfortunately, here, but
Yep.
um, how do we find out more about the book and
So it's
your
available on Amazon. You can either look it up by Mike Studer, or you can look it up by The Brain That Chooses Itself. And again, the choice element is strong in there. It's not The Brain That Changes Itself, which is a well-written book by Norman Deutsch about how the brain can change itself. This is The Brain That Chooses Itself. Amazon is where to find it. If you email me, I will send you an inscribed copy of it, though, as well. And my email is super easy, mike@mikestuder.com.
awesome. And the website is obviously MikeStuder.com, correct?
That is correct also. Studer.
Awesome. Real quick, rapid fire questions for you.
Yeah, go
What
ahead.
message would you like every stroke listener today to remember?
Neuroplasticity doesn't time out. You are the captain of your rehabilitation.
What would you say to someone who believes they've recovered as much as they're going to?
What other aspects of your body or brain would you still like to optimize?
Oh, I like that. If every rehabilitation professional could change one thing tomorrow, what would you want that to be?
Listen more, talk less.
Right. If listeners remember only one sentence from today, what do you hope it is?
Your brain must choose the pathway toward your recovery.
Mike, thank you so much for joining us in Stroke Warrior Radio today and reminding us that neuroplasticity never stops. Your message gave me hope during my recovery, I have to tell you that. Um, and it gives hope that recovery is driven by challenge, purpose, and the brain's lifelong ability to adapt. You'll find links to Mike's website, books, etc., on today's show notes, also on the podcast or on our website. Remember, your story matters, your recovery is worth fighting for, and you're never alone on this path. Michael, thank you very much.
My pleasure indeed.
If today's conversation inspired any of you, please share this episode with at least two people who could benefit. Together, we're strengthening the recovery community one conversation at a time. Have a great day.